Hey, good morning, everybody. It's September 30th, 2024. I want to make this podcast, this episode, um, as real and as candid and as visceral as it needs to be. I'm standing outside the Capitol, the state capitol of Alabama. And the topics that I want to take up here today cover material that was in the podcast yesterday. I know the recording was not good. And so I want to pick up those topics today. But I want to do it from standing here where I'm at. Because if you want to understand where we are in America today with Donald Trump and the things that he's doing and saying, and the response of Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, and the majority of Americans, then you have to come to Alabama. You have to come here either physically, as we do several times a year on our learning tours, or you have to come here figuratively to look at the words, the messages, and the ideologies. I'll be doing a lecture series next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday course for the Institute for Common Power that's titled Lost Cause Politics. Jefferson Davis to to George Wallace to Donald Trump. So this podcast today is essentially aligned with that, 100% aligned with that. But it'll be in much greater, longer detail in that series. And so I encourage you to sign up for that, to join me for that, because this podcast is an entry point to it. But that course will be much deeper, much more. And it will be recorded so you can watch it on your own time if you can't make it on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So I'm standing, 100 feet from the state capitol. I'm going to turn the phone image, the view of the phone around in a second. Outside the Alabama state capitol, September 30th, the last day of September in what is a defining year for our country. And the reason that this place is so important is because there is no place where the fight for racial and voting justice has been more visceral, more existential than right here. That's the Alabama state capitol. Up on top of there's an American flag. At different times, Confederate flags have flown above the Capitol, both during the Civil War, but also in the 1960s. And this statue over here on the left, right there, is just exactly who you might think it would be. It's Jefferson Davis looking down Dexter Avenue from the steps of the Alabama Capitol, where he took his oath of office in 1861. And what we are seeing right now with Donald Trump is the most racist, most violent, most divisive political or presidential campaign that we've seen in American history since George Wallace. Since George Wallace came to power in Alabama in the 1960s. So I want to start here, and I'm going to walk up these steps, and it will be interesting. There are some people around. They will hear what I'm talking about. So it could be interesting. In 1958, George Wallace was a fairly moderate judge in the state of Alabama. And he ran for the governorship. He was known by African Americans in the state as somebody who was racist and a segregationist, but not the worst of the worst. He would refer to the very few black lawyers in Alabama at that time who came into his courtroom, he would refer to them with the names of Mr., and they were all men. And he was known to order out lunch so that they could eat, the lawyers could eat in his chambers, because the black and the white lawyers couldn't eat together anywhere else in Montgomery. And he would eat with them. Wallace didn't win that election. Wallace lost that election. And he lost that governorship election in 1958 to a man by the name of John Patterson. And Patterson was worse on race, worse on segregation than Wallace. He was more racist. And at the end of that campaign, Wallace took a very important lesson from it. Took the lesson that he needed to be more racist. He needed to be more segregationist. So he decided to do that. I'm walking up the steps here. I'm walking up to a particular place. And so in 1962, he ran that kind of campaign. The more racist, more segregationist, the more white supremacist. And he won. He won convincingly. And he understood something much larger than him, that if he could adapt this message to talking terminologies that were so close to outright racism, but slightly adjacent, that he could modify it and take it national. And he did. In 1964, he ran in the Democratic primary, not intending to win. He knew Lyndon Johnson was going to win the primary, but just to see how it would go. He ran in 3 states in 1964. Ran in Wisconsin for the Democratic primary. He ran in Indiana for the Democratic primary, and he ran in Maryland for the Democratic primary. Before he came to Wisconsin, the Wisconsin Republican governor, and Republicans were much, much, much more moderate than they were not today's Republicans, said that he said, come on, George Wallace, come to Wisconsin. You won't even win 100,000 votes in the primary. And Wallace came to Wisconsin, and he campaigned in the suburbs of Milwaukee, campaigned in the beer halls of Milwaukee, went down in Racine and close to Chicago. And he met adoring fans. They sang Dixie to him in Polish in a beer hall in Milwaukee. And Wallace said, I'll never live outside of Alabama. I love my Alabama. But if I were to live outside of Alabama, I'd move to South Milwaukee. And he got 33% of the vote in the Democratic primary, and he got almost 300,000 votes. And he went to Indiana, and he got 33%, almost identical again, percent of the Democratic primary. And then he went to Maryland, and he got over 40% of the Democratic primary. And he didn't keep running because Lyndon Johnson was going to be the nominee, but he'd made his point. In 1968, he ran again, and this time he won 5 states across the American South. In 72, he ran again, and then he was shot in Maryland. And in 1976, he ran again. The Wallace politics have been picked up by Donald Trump. They're about racism delivered in a coded way. They're about an argument about America, some dimensions of America being great that are somehow being lost or stolen, even more viscerally is the terminology. And so I'm here at this space on top of the Capitol steps now. I've walked up the steps because to understand Donald Trump today, we have to understand George Wallace. And to understand George Wallace, we have to understand the Confederacy. So that's the focus of the lecture series, the course, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Today, I can't take all that on in this podcast, this episode. And we don't have that much time. We have, what do we have? 33 days, 32 days left. So I'm standing right here. And when I turn my phone around, I'm going to show you exactly where I'm standing. Because this is where George Wallace stood in 1963 when he delivered the most famous / infamous speech by any governor in American history. His 1963 inaugural. January 14th, 1963, it was almost 0 degrees here, bitter cold in Alabama. And George Wallace took the oath of office, having run that campaign, that racist campaign, and knowing that he was going to take this message national, that he was going to do it, that what was in Alabama would go national. So now I'm looking down from the state capitol, down Dexter Avenue, one of the most famous streets in America. That building right there in brown, that church steeple, that's Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. pastored in the 1950s. But I'm right here now in front of the state capitol. As we can see right here, this plaque, it says Alabama State Capitol has been designated a registered national historic landmark. 1935 it was put here. The reason this was put here is because the Confederate States had voted in 1861 to secede as a group on the second floor of this building. And so that's why it's put here. Sorry, it was, there's a historic act in 1935. This was put here in 1962. What do you know? Right exactly when we're talking about it, when George Wallace wins governor's election. And on the floor, this is the doors. These are the doors inside. And on the floor right here, not the floor, but on the steps is a star. And of course, it looks like a Star of David. And it says, placed by the Sophie Bibb chapter of the United Daughters of the Confederacy. I gotta get down closer here. On the spot where Jefferson Davis stood when inaugurated president of the CSA, the Confederate States of America, February 18th, 1861. That's enshrined right here in the marble in front of the steps to the state capitol. George Wallace stood on this star, took the oath of office in 1963, January 14th, with a big, big sign in front of him that said, "In God we trust." And then he walked down the Capitol steps. I'm going to do that right now. He walked down the Capitol steps to the base of the steps. I'm going to walk down these steps here. See steps? It's a really nice day today, muggy and warm. And he came down these steps towards Dexter Avenue. And at the base of these steps, he delivered an address, an inaugural address, in which he declared the sanctity, the purity of America, rural America, small America, non-federal government America, who all were just pursuing their freedom. Were just pursuing their freedom. And they just wanted a chance to live out those dreams in a certain way, with certain power, with certain dominance, with certain oppression. And in the most famous words of that address, George Wallace said, "Today, I have stood where once Jefferson Davis stood and took an oath to my people." And by those my people, he clearly means white Americans, white Alabamians. It is very appropriate then that from this cradle of the Confederacy, this very heart of the great Anglo-Saxon Southland, that today we sound the drum for freedom, as have our generations of forebears before us done, time and time again through history. Let us rise to the call of freedom, to the rise of freedom, with the rise of freedom-loving blood that is in us, and send our answer to the tyranny that clanks its chains upon the South. In the name of the greatest people that have ever trod this earth, I draw the line in the dust and toss the gauntlet before the feet of tyranny. And I say, segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. You can see the speech on YouTube. And Wallace went back up these steps, back into the Capitol, took down the American flag, which is up there. You can't barely see it right now. There's no wind. Took down the American flag and raised the Confederate flag as a declaration that they would not be participating in any notion of a multiracial American democracy. They would not. And he said to the Kennedys, "Come get me." And he understood that in positioning the South, the great Anglo-Saxon majority of the American South, against the so-called tyranny of the federal government, that he would be able to invoke the notions of white America versus diversifying America, and that he would and they would not participate. It's a rhetorical move that got enshrined in states' rights and would be picked up by Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan, and now Donald Trump, talking about law and order and about small town America under assault. The Confederate flag flew either on top of the Capitol here, Jefferson Davis right there, or on the side of the Capitol all the way until 2015. And in 2015, it got taken down by the governor then after the massacre by a white supremacist Confederate flag wearing Dylan Roof in Charleston, South Carolina, of 9 African American parishioners at Mother Emanuel Church. Jefferson Davis stands. The South stands. Today, it's represented in the voice of Donald Trump and MAGA Nation. These are the stakes. Okay? It is up this street in 1965 that the Selma to Montgomery March came and stopped. They could not get on the Capitol grounds. George Wallace would not allow them. But it is on this street right here that Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his "How Long, Not Long" speech about the fight for justice. So it is at this intersection that these clashes of the fight for one version of America, there and there, is met by another version of America, 25,000 strong, here. It's quite possible that this gray painting on the street here signifies or captures where the flatbed truck that Dr. King spoke from in 1965. So I'm literally standing at the crossroads of two Americas. And that's where we stand today, folks. That's where we stand today. Donald Trump is running on the same kind of coded racism that George Wallace ran on. And it wins. It can win in much of America. At the end of this podcast today, I'm going to share the clip of Kamala Harris speaking at the United States and Mexico border from Friday. I included that yesterday in the podcast. I want to bring it back here to end this podcast because it is a vision of America that is strong and inclusive and humane together. And that's what doing both on immigration looks like. It's an embrace of the diverse America and also sovereign United States, where our leadership has a responsibility to make sure that all Americans are safe and secure. And that includes people coming here and establishing their lives and contributing to our society. It includes all peoples. Donald Trump is offering the opposite vision of that. He wants to mass deport people who are immigrants. He has said the most vile and racist things about immigrants and Haitians, specifically in Springfield, Ohio. 2 days ago in Wisconsin, he said, they're killers. They'll come into your house. They'll slit your throat. They have an argument that there's 15,000 quote unquote killers in this country right now who are illegally here because of the Biden-Harris immigration policies. He says they eat cats, they eat dogs. He said they're destroying America, beautiful America, small town America, which, folks, is straight from the George Wallace playbook. White, rural, small town, beautiful America means white America. That's what it means. And he's lying, just like Wallace did. And Wallace was lying just like generations of Southern politicians all the way back to the Civil War had lied. Delusional, racist, power grabbing. And yesterday in Pennsylvania, Donald Trump said, what we need is one day in which the police can do anything they want, can be violent as they want, rough people up, said it'll take care of everything. One day, just one day. Folks, that is a straight law and order argument about the appropriate, that claims the value and the appropriateness of power and pain by the state leadership, also known as the white state leadership. The forces that define this country, that are at stake at that crossroads right back there, are alive and visceral right now. And so I know that in the CP universe, that we were made for this, that this is what this organization is made for, to respond, to take action, to go, to do. It's hard, this fight, but it's not new. And for everybody who's been targeted by these racist, oppressive approaches to the world, have been targeted their entire lives. have been targeted for hundreds of years. Not only is this not new, it's exhausting. And yet we fight. And we will. And so we must know that when Donald Trump, as he will do, as he is doing, and as he will do every single day from here through the election, calls us to our worst impulses and demonizes Americans who aren't the beautiful small town white Americans that he is fighting for, that we have never had a more definitive, clear line of action than we have today. For those of us that believe in the ideals of this nation, for those of us who believe that we can be our best angels, for those of us who say that we care about everybody and want everybody to have a fair shot in this country, for those of us who see in Kamala Harris and Tim Walz the America that we can be, that we are called to be. Action. Where does action occur in common power? It occurs in three definitive ways. First, in our education. Listening to these podcasts, certainly. Joining Dr. Scott in all of the great teaching that she does in the Institute. Come to my lectures next week. My phone alarm just went off because I had set it to wake me up at this time. But obviously, I'm awake. In fact, I was awake at 4:45 this morning because we're going to Selma today to close this learning tour, and I can feel it in my soul. I can feel it in my soul this moment, and that's why I decided to do this podcast this way. I turned the laptop on and hit recording in the hotel room, which allowed me then to record on my phone as I'm out doing this, out walking. So our first form of action is education, because the more we know, the more we can do and do more effectively. That is a core belief in common power. The second way we take action, and the third way, are the pieces that must be done now. They must be done now. They may have been something you've been doing over and over again, and we need more. We need more now, because every vote is going to matter. In Wisconsin, where George Wallace went in 1964 and Donald Trump won in 2016. In Michigan, that Donald Trump won in 2016. In Pennsylvania, that Donald Trump won in 2016. In Georgia, in North Carolina, and the devastation that they're having from Hurricane Helene. In Arizona, in Montana, in Nevada. Those two forms of action are time and treasure. Time to come with us. Time to do the very hard work that is necessary to get people out to vote. Folks, you got to do it remotely. We have to do it in person. We have to spend hours upon hours to the point of great fatigue. Never has there been a moment of democratic political action more important to this in the lifetimes of all of us. And so we need your time. We need your time to do this work. And we need your treasure. The treasure is the money that makes it possible. The treasure are the funds that allow us to send young volunteers out into the field to do work, to go to these key states. We have 32 educators, 33 educators on this trip with Dr. Terry Scott and me. They're from all over this country, and they are on the front lines. They are the ones being attacked by MAGA Nation, by political officials, by parents who don't want us to teach truth, don't want us to teach about the content that I'm talking about on this podcast. The George Wallaces, the Donald Trumps, the way Ronald Reagan served as a bridge between them. Story after story among these educators about the ways in which their ability to teach truth about America, our history and our present, are under assault, and not just in red states. And so the treasure comes in our ability to support these people. And these teachers do work with us in multiple ways. First and foremost, they travel out to do work in the field and knock on doors. Several of them have already indicated they're ready to go. This election, they will need to take personal days to make it happen. We want to support them in that. We need your support to make that happen. They also apply for and get teaching grants from us to be innovative in the ways in which they do their education. These are small, $1,000 or less grants. We want to give them out to everybody who's trying to do this work, because they impact thousands upon thousands of students a year. We want to bring more of them on these trips. We're not going to get more in for this election, but the battle is going to go long beyond this election. The Institute for Common Power, led by Dr. Terry Scott, within the family of organizations for common power, is just brilliant and powerful, and your support goes to that. So the treasure part of this organization is about supporting these endeavors. And I have said on the podcast and in my emails and in my lectures that I'm going to keep asking for support for this organization in direct relationship to our expanding footprint of influence. Tomorrow, on Tuesday, in Seattle, come to our debate watch party downtown. It is being co-sponsored by the Washington Democrats and the Harris Walls campaign in the state of Washington. Come be with us as our footprint increases. Come be with us as our footprint nationally increases in our field work, as we partner with Vote Save America and they drive their people through our organization to travel, as we are requested by organization and campaign after campaign around the country to come do work, and our footprint increases. Come with us to our education and meet the educators, the Terry Scotts, the Hassan Jeffries, who are just the world's best experts on the way in which race has been used as a weapon in America, and then turn that into political knowledge and action today through our field work, through our voting. To be a national leader, to take on the Wallace, Trump world, and to win. It takes everything, folks. It takes pain and stretching and sacrifice and fatigue Yesterday in Birmingham, Dr. Terry Scott and I went through a 20-year timeline of the fight for justice in this country, from World War II through 1965 in the Voting Rights Act. And it's just one window, but it obviously is a revolutionary window that changed this country. And in that timeline, we highlighted successes and we honored the losses, the costs. Emmett Till, a bus being burned and bombed in Anniston, Alabama. The Little Rock Nine being vilified. Four young girls and two young boys murdered in Birmingham, bombed. Cheney, Schwerner, and Goodman, Mississippi. Jimmy Lee Jackson, James Reeb, Viola Liuzzo, Jonathan Daniels, and Selma. Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Bobby Kennedy, John Kennedy. They're all Americans who are fighting the right direction, the right way for an inclusive, multiracial America. No one of them got everything right. But collectively, they moved us forward as a country. And the cost was enormous. We go to Selma today with our group for our final full day. And we go to that most sacred of locations, the Edmund Pettus Bridge, where 600 Selmians, almost all of them African American, came across that bridge in pursuit of voting rights, intending to march to Montgomery to present to the governor a declaration, a statement of principles about democracy and the right to vote. Intending to walk 54 miles to the steps of the Capitol and to approach and confront George Wallace. When they came over that bridge, they were beaten, tear gassed, trampled by horses, cattle prodded, and they were knocked backwards. Badly, badly, badly beaten. And then they came back, this time with a few thousand of Americans, many of them white, who joined them 2 days later for their second run at it. And they went over that bridge and they had to turn around again. And then Lyndon Johnson went on. No, I'm sorry, that night on Tuesday night, James Reeb, a white minister, a Unitarian minister from Boston, who had come to Selma, responding to Dr. King's invitation and request. Reeb was killed by the Klan, killed by the same folks that want to kill us today. They want to stop us. They want to prevent this fight. And on March 15th, that was in March, first March was on March 7th, second March was March 9th. On March 15th, Lyndon Johnson gave what I consider perhaps the most impactful, important speech by any president in the modern American era, the Voting Rights Act speech, saying that he was putting forward a Voting Rights Act to make sure that all Americans could vote. And on March 21st, now with the protections of the federal government, and I'm going to say that again, now with the protections of the federal government, those marchers went back over that bridge again and went 54 miles all the way to Montgomery. They made it. Took them 5 days. They marched through rain. They marched through Lowndes County, where not a single African American was on the voting rolls. Wasn't there. Where the Klan hid in the woods, ready to potentially shoot them, but the National Guard protected them. And they came into Montgomery, and they celebrated with 25,000 people now that had come to join them. Good morning. Good morning. And when they got here and they marched to the state capitol, they couldn't get on the Capitol grounds because George Wallace had ringed it with state police. And he hid inside and looked out a window and refused to meet with them, because at their heart, at their core, these folks who claim all this power, they're cowards. They're fucking cowards. This is our chance. This is our moment, folks. Do you want to see what leadership looks like? Then we look at the words of Kamala Harris at the border in Mexico. Immigration is a tough issue. Harris's position on immigration is more moderate than perhaps many people in CP Nation would like. I understand that. Morning. She has, with Biden, pursued a policy that brings in many Republican dimensions. And in doing that, she has made clear her positions on border security and safety. Good morning, Erica. At the same time, she's accentuated humaneness, respecting the dignity of humans, of all Americans, of all people who support democratic values. Thank you so much. And good morning. And she laid that out in a speech at the border. I'm walking inside right now, obviously. Hey, Sam, good morning. She laid that out in a speech at the border in Douglas, Arizona. And it's a speech of strength. It's a speech of certainty. It's a speech of inclusiveness. It's a speech of respect. And it is not the speech as I would write it. But that doesn't matter, because it's a speech about leadership. It's about being the one who will say, we're going to do this in a way that takes care of our country and respects the people who come here and contribute to it. She didn't do it from behind the curtains of a third floor window like George Wallace hid it behind. She didn't do it from Mar-a-Lago, behind the cloistered exterior of a security protected private residence. She did it in full public view with the strength of a leader. And she talked about what leaders should do, must do, and what we should demand from them. Folks, we need action now. We need the most definitive action we can imagine. We need time and treasure. We certainly need education. We need all of us. All right? We're asking for your engagement. for your support, not for common power as an organization, but for common power as an idea. Small c, small p, and small d, democracy. Here's the last few minutes of Harris's speech at the border on Friday. This is what leadership looks like. This is how you speak to all of America. And you trust our values to guide us through.
Okay, I'm back just in my hotel room now to show the video clip from Vice President Harris. This is what leadership looks like. This is what we need to get behind with everything we've got.
And all of this to say, we must tackle this issue from every angle, because our highest charge must be to protect the lives of our people. It must be to understand the pain and to have the courage to know that solutions are at hand if we focus on fixing a problem instead of running on a problem. And on this issue, writ large, we must ensure that our country remains strong and competitive, which includes fixing our broken immigration system. And let me be clear, I reject the false choice. I reject the false choice that suggests we must either choose between securing our border or creating a system of immigration that is safe, orderly, and humane. We can and we must do both. We must do both. And we need clear legal pathways for people seeking to come into our country. And we must make our current system work better. For example, it can take years for asylum claims to be decided. Well, this is a problem we can solve, including by hiring more asylum officers and expanding processing centers in people's home countries. And as president, I will work with Congress to create, at long last, a pathway to citizenship for hardworking immigrants who have been here for years. For years. And deserve to have a system that works. I also have in mind our dreamers. I have met with so many of our dreamers throughout my career. They who have grown up in the United States, were educated here, pay taxes here, serve in our military, and contribute to our communities every day. They are American in every way. But still, they do not have an earned pathway to citizenship. And this problem has gone unsolved at this point now for decades. The same goes for farm workers, who ensure that we have food on our tables and who sustain our agricultural industry. And they too have been in legal limbo for years because politicians have refused to come together to fix our broken immigration system. Well, as president, I will put politics aside to fix our immigration system and find solutions to problems which have persisted for far too long.
Look, I'm no stranger to close races, and one of the most powerful things I've learned is
For far too long, we have all known this is not working as it can and as it should. And so, as I said at the beginning, these issues are highly consequential for our nation. And the contrast in this election is clear. It is a choice between common sense solutions and the same old political games. In the 4 years that Donald Trump was president, he did nothing to fix our broken immigration system. He did not solve the shortage of immigration judges. He did not solve the shortage of border agents. He did not create lawful pathways into our nation. He did nothing to address an outdated asylum system and did not work with other governments in our hemisphere to deal with what clearly is also a regional challenge. As overdoses went up during his presidency, he fought to slash funding for the fight against fentanyl. And what did he do instead? Well, let's talk about that. He separated families. He ripped toddlers out of their mother's arms, put children in cages, and tried to end protections for dreamers. He made the challenges at the border worse. And he is still fanning the flames of fear and division. And let me be clear, that is not the work of a leader. That is not the work of a leader. And that is, in fact, I think we all believe, an abdication of leadership. And so, on behalf of all across our nation who want to see these problems solved, I say we cannot accept Donald Trump's failure to lead. We should not permit scapegoating instead of solutions. And let's see what's happening. Let's not permit scapegoating instead of solutions, or rhetoric instead of results. As your president, I will protect our nation's sovereignty, secure our border, and work to fix our broken system of immigration. And I will partner with Democrats, Republicans, and independents to do it. Arizona, it is time for us to turn the page on the ugly battles that have characterized our politics. And it is time to move forward together to achieve real solutions that make our country stronger. And I know we can get this done. I know we have the will. I know we have the courage. I know the solutions are at hand, and I know we are ready. And so with all of that, I say thank you. May God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Okay. I love that Raphael Warnock's advertisement showed up right in the middle of that as an ad. It's perfect. Folks, let's go. It's time to beat George Wallace. It's time to beat George Wallace. We have to.